derailed. It looks like this crisis can't be stopped. A freight train of destruction with President Biden's PEB acting as conductors and engineers. This is coming off the rails, and we are on track to see what could possibly be one of the worst fumbles occurring during President Biden's time in office. U.S. freight railroads prepare for potential strike disruption. And so should you. A railroad strike could send food prices soaring even higher, as the nation's supply of food could take a severe hit if railroad workers go on strike, driving up prices at the grocery stores and limiting U.S. grain exports to countries facing famine. As soon as next week, 115,000 freight rail workers could walk out if they cannot reach a new contract with railroads, potentially shutting down the national rail network that transports 20% of all grain shipments. Major U.S. freight railroads said on Friday they were preparing for a possible strike and severe disruption a week before the cooling off period deadline. Failure to reach an agreement between the railroad companies and the railroad workers' unions before the deadline, and to avoid a national rail strike, which could cost the U.S. economy $2 billion a day, is drawing closer and closer by the minute. It is becoming more clear that they are preparing for a railroad shutdown. Class 1 railroads prepare to suspend security-sensitive shipments ahead of potential strikes by shutting down hazardous shipments expected to face embargoes in the coming days. Norfolk Southern Chief Marketing Officer Ed Elkins said Norfolk Southern Company will start to issue embargoes for certain types of shipments, including rail security-sensitive material. Elkins said some unions have not reached an agreement and have not committed to not strike. And Elkins said, we must take steps to ensure we can shut down operations safely if a strike were to occur. It looks like things are about to get ugly, folks, and things could go from bad to worse overnight. According to a report released by the Association of American Railroads, unions and freight railroads are projected to have a substantial economic impact as a result of a nationwide railroad strike, which could be upwards of more than $2 billion a day. So far, 7 of the 12 unions representing 94,000 Class 1 railroad employees have failed to reach agreements with the railroads, according to some reports. And as a reminder, the expiration of the 30-day cooling off period is when the unions can walk off the job, and that expires at midnight on September 16th. The report from the Association of American Railroads Policy and Economics team states that if a strike happens, the 140,000-mile network of rails across 49 states and 7,000 Class 1 trains would be idled, and the impact would cripple both the movement of trade and commuters. Also adding that there are not enough trucks or truck drivers to move the rail-bound containers, with an estimated additional need of at least 467,000 long-haul trucks per day that would be needed to handle the freight volume. That just doesn't exist. Logistics CEO told CNBC the impact of a nationwide rail strike would impact the economy far more than a port strike on the West Coast, which could be a likely possibility in the future as well. And we have to keep in mind that China shipments are down and the U.S. ports are still struggling. If these were to both occur, the Biden administration would go down in history. Alan Baer, CEO of OL USA, said, and OL USA is a full-service international and domestic transportation partner in air freight, full container ocean, import and export, intermodal, and supply. Baer said, depending on the length of any service interruption, the overall impact would double each day the interruption continued. This would become an exponentially increasing problem every 24 hours. Let me break that down for you guys. Think compound interest, but instead of earning positive returns on your investment, you are instead digging yourself into a deep, deep hole. And every day that passes, you get a bigger shovel so you can dig deeper and faster. Baer also said, as we experience with the ports, delays mounted quickly and it is now taking weeks to unwind. Domestic trucking rates would surge as capacity disappears, and described this as an overall nightmare scenario. The details of the deal were recommended by the Presidential Advisory Board appointed by President Joe Biden in July to avert a strike. And so far, this hasn't happened. Negotiations appear to have come to a standstill, much like all Class 1 freight will on September 16th. And it doesn't appear at this time as though Biden even gives a damn about the massive catastrophe that we soon face. They currently have a non-binding proposal, but if implemented, railroad companies would see employees receiving a 14.1% wage increase effective immediately, and a 24% compounded wage increase during the 5-year period from 2020 through 2024. Service recognition bonuses would also be given to employees over the duration of the contract and would total $5,000. Combining the lump sum payments and the retroactive wage increases, employees would receive an average immediate payout totaling more than $11,000. If the deal were to be accepted, the average pay of a rail employee would be approximately $110,000 per year by the end of the agreement. Combined with benefits like retirement and health care, employees would earn $160,000 a year, a substantial increase. In order to be ratified, the terms of the deal have to be agreed upon between both the unions and the railroads. However, should negotiations fail and result in a work stoppage, Congress must act to implement President Biden's PEB, or Presidential Emergency Board, recommendations, rewarding employees and stopping unnecessary economic harm and uncertainty for rail customers. Seems highly likely. Several major industries, including the Fertilizer Institute and Retail Industry Leaders Association, have sent letters to Congress urging for their swift intervention. One letter stated that over half of all fertilizer moves by rail year-round throughout the United States, and the timeliness and reliability of fertilizer shipments is absolutely critical, and that if farmers do not receive fertilizer, it results in lower crop yields, higher food prices, and more inflation for consumers. A railroad shutdown in mid-September would quickly overwhelm grain storage facilities, leaving farmers with few options to store their crops and boosting the chance of spoilage. Many grain processors would shut down, raising the price of bread and other common items, while farmers would be saddled with huge crop quantities and lower commodity prices. Pain all around. Another letter said that failure to reach a reasonable agreement could result in significant disruptions to the rail network, the retail industry, and ultimately the American consumer, which accounts for more than $1.5 trillion in annual retail sales. These industries heavily rely on rail to move their products, including e-commerce, agriculture, chemical, automotive, construction, and coal. The report noted the U.S. supply chain would also be disrupted by raw material delays such as lumber from Canada used for home building and construction to autos and auto parts. And UPS, for example, may in fact be the single largest rail customer by volume. The report stated a single intermodal container or trailer railroads carry for UPS could contain 1,800 to 2,000 packages. A train with 100 containers or trailers could have 200,000 UPS packages headed for our doorsteps. Commuters would feel the pain as well, as Amtrak would also be significantly impacted. According to the report, Passenger Railroad Service owns a very small fraction of its rail system, with the remaining 97% running on tracks owned and maintained by freight railroads. And in addition to the rails itself, the freight railroads also offer services to Amtrak ranging from station maintenance, train dispatching, and emergency repairs to security. The negotiations between the 12 railroad worker unions and the National Carriers Conference Committee have been going on for years without any real resolution. Both the union and railroad negotiators will meet again with the National Mediation Board on Thursday and Friday the 16th. A railroad shutdown and railroad workers strike is about the last thing the U.S. economy needs as it struggles to get over several years of supply chain issues. A prolonged strike could mean empty shelves in stores, temporary closures at factories that don't have the parts they need to operate, and higher prices due to the limited availability of various consumer goods. Time is running out, folks.